Wysteria, energy, twister. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and the world of the fairies. So we're going to continue where we left off. We're now on the Alcide, or the Alcide, or the Alcides. The Alcides groves of classical Greek mythology were a subspecies of the Limoniad. They were the nymphs of sacred groves, but they also appeared in glens, lightly forested areas, and meadows. These fairies had a reputation as being pranksters and enjoyed playing tricks on travellers. Alston. Alston is a British surname whose origins came from the Old English, and it translates meaning from the elf's abode. Althea, one of the Hyaid. Althea was a nymph of Mount Ida on the island of Crete in the Greek Aegean Sea. She was one of the nurses to the infant god Zeus. She was commonly grouped with fellow nymphs as well, so she wasn't usually alone. Althea. Also, there's a variation, Amalthea, a nymph of Mount Ida on the island of Crete in the Greek Aegean Sea. She was one of the nurses to the infant god Zeus. Althiof. Althiof is one of the many dwarfs named in the Voluspa, the first and best known poem of the Poetic Edda, a collection of Old Norse poems dating back to AD 985. Althiolf. Now, Althiolf means mighty thief, and it's a dwarf that's also, well, another dwarf that's named in the Voluspa as well, but known as, obviously, a good thief. Now, this one it means all thief, Aljofa, and again, it's another of the dwarfs named in the Voluspa. Alux, and the plural is Alux ob. Now, there are variations to this being depending where in the world you are. Alus, Ahulut, there's also Ajipans, Alush, Barux, Corinquiens, Coroperas, Duende, Goazes, Goazis, Ixtabe, Cax, Matuyus, Vasistris. The main people of the Yucatan Peninsula and Guatemala had in their fairy mythology a being known as the Alux. Standing only about knee height and dressed in traditional Mayan clothing, the Aluxub remained invisible except to frighten humans or when congregating together. A type of nature spirit, these fae were associated with natural features such as cave, forest, large stones, but it's believed with proper offerings an Alux could be enticed to move to a different location. A small one and two-story shrines called a Katal Alux, House of the Alux, dot the countryside. Farmers would sometimes build such a structure in their maize field for the Aluxub to move into. It was said for 7 years the fairy would dwell in the shrine and care for the crops, even causing proper amounts of rain to fall. And at the end of 7 years, the doors and windows of the shrine must be closed, trapping the Aluxub inside. If this was not done, the fairies would become injurious tricksters. Alva, and again, it does have many variations, but in German the word Alva means army or elves. Alven, but its variation is Ottomaanea. In the fairy lore from the Netherlands, the Alven elves were a species of light elves that were described as having transparent and translucent bodies. These were powerful fae, and they were said to have control over lakes, ponds, and rivers in which they lived. Interestingly, they were also said to have a strong dislike of fish. Mainly associated with the River Elbe, the wingless elven flew through the air by riding upon or within bubbles of eggshells. Especially fond of night-blooming plants such as nightwort, they would cause illness or even death to any cattle or human who harms these plants. We have Alvin, and this is an old English word, Alvin meaning elf wine or noble friend. Just kind of depends, you know. The Alvina is also an old English word, and it means friend of the elves. Alvis, also known as Alois, all wise. It's one of the kings of the dwarf in Nordic mythology. His story is told in Alvis Maleda. Alvis had fallen in love with Thrud, a powerful Valkyrie and a daughter of the god Thor. When he asked for her hand in marriage, it was granted if Alvis would stand before Thor that evening and correctly answer 13 questions about the naming of beer, clouds, fire, forest, moon, night, sea, sky, stillness, sun, wheat, wind, and the world in the languages of the Aesir, the elves, the giants, the gods, and the Vanir. The questions were simple enough, but took a great deal of time to answer fully. Just as Alvis had correctly answered the last one, and took a step to take the hand of the woman he had rightfully won, the first rays of sun fell upon him, turning the dwarf king into stone, it is believed. Amadan. So the Amadan does have various names that it goes along with. Amadain, the Amadan Moor, the Amadan Na, Brionna, Amadan Na Bruni, Stroke Lad. The Amadan was a fool of the Irish Sea, choosing people at random to curse or punish with his incurable crippling touch. The Endurous Fae disfigured an individual in such a way it would cause them to be ridiculed for the rest of their lives. Fortunately, his presence alone was not enough to do the damage. Even the famed fairy doctor, Biddy Early, was unable to cure Amadan's touch. In more severe cases, Amadan would strike a person dead on the spot. Although active all year long, he was particularly active during the month of June. According to Lady Isabella Augusta Gregory, an Irish dramatist and folklorist, if Amadan was seen, a difficult prospect, as he was not only a shapeshifter but could become invisible. His assault could be prevented by repeating the prayer, "The Lord between us and harm," until he left the area, or you have moved far enough away from him, because the fairy was insane, even by fairy standards. There was no reasoning with him. There was no way to appeal to him, to reverse the harm he had caused. That's just how he was. Amalthea. Amalthea, tender goddess, was a nymph from classical Greek mythology who nursed the god Zeus while he was an infant with goat's milk. In some tellings, she was described having horns of being a goat. She was rewarded for her services to the god by being placed among the stars of heaven, making her the constellation known as the celestial goat. Oh, kind of pretty that, really. Amathea. A sea nymph, Amathea, queen of voice, one of the nearest, named in Homer's Iliad. She was described as having azure locks, luxuriant, or some translations put it long, heavy hair. Long, heavy hair. So the next is Amatongo, or for plural, Umzimu. In African fairy lore, the Amatongo ancestors were a type of ancestral spirit similar to the fairies of Scottish lore. They were first. Amatongo was created by the death of the first man. Since that time, more of these fae were created when an existing Amatongo takes the life of a person. Those so taken were now Amatongo and worshipped as such. Each family worshipped the previous head of the house, but seldom further back, as the names of long dead were quickly forgotten. When proper sacrifices and prayer requests were made, the Amatongo appeared either in a dream, as a lizard, or as a snake. Uncommon for the Fae, these fairies had the ability to possess a person, causing convulsions and hysteria. When they took up residence in a human body, they anchored themselves between the person's shoulders. In addition to causing illness in animals and humans, the Amatongo could also cure illness if proper applications were made and supplications to them. Doctors would often pray to them as part of their healing process. Amberbad. So, Amberbad, Amber City, one of the cities or provinces in Afghanistan, the Persian mythology equivalent of fairyland. Ambrosia. According to the classical Greek mythology, Ambrosia was one of the Dodonides, the seven nymphs who cared for the infant god Zeus. The Amnesiades. In classic Greek mythology, they were nymphs of the river Amnisos and the island of Crete in the Aegean Sea. They were the descendants of the goddess Artemis, apparently. Amoret. In Greek mythology, Amoret was the epitome of grace and charm. She and her twin sister, Belphoebe, were born the daughters of the nymph Chrysogone. Their father was the warm sunlight that fell on the sleeping Chrysogone after she bathed one afternoon. Born in the woods, the infants were found by the goddesses Diana and Venus as they were searching for the lost god Cupid. Belphoebe was taken and raised by Diana, while Amoret was raised by Venus, who took her to the gardens of Adonis. Amoret fell in love with a knight named Scudamore. He courted her and won her love over 20 suitors. Yeah, wow, so she had a lot. Ampelos. In ancient Greek mythology, Ampelos was one of the Hamadryad, born of from the incestuous relationship between Oxylus and his sister, Hamadryas. Ampelos was a hamadryad of vines, especially vitis. Amphicommon. Amphicommon. Greek mythology, it's a water nymph and one of the Danads, the collective name for the daughters of Danus, and her name appears in a list of Danads generated by Gaius Julius Hyginus. This was 64 BC and AD 17, and again, it was a Latin author, as you can probably tell by the name. Amphinome, a sea nymph born of Nereus and Doris. There's lots of sea nymphs, so to be honest. Amphiero, born of 3,000 daughters of the Titans Oceanus and Tethys. Amphiero was one of the named Oceanids. Amphiero, again, was one of the daughters of 3,000 of the Titans and the Oceanus and Tethys. And she is like flowing water or usually a surrounding stream, but she's one of the Oceanids. Amphitrite. She was again one of the 3,000 daughters of the Titans, Oceanus, and Tethys. She was one of the named Oceanids. Amphitrite was also the Nereid of hot flow sea caves, as well as the nymph who in classic Greek mythology reluctantly married the god of the sea Poseidon. She tired of her husband's affair, though, with Scylla, and so changed her into a sea monster. As a Nereid, she was born the daughter of Nereus and Doris. But there is actually various writings regarding that. You can find a few stories regarding her, and they're very different. Then we have Amymone, Hypernestra, but also Anemone, but a variation is Hypernestra. Classic Greek mythology, there are two different versions of Amymone's story. The pre-Olympian myth, she was a beautiful nymph who caught the eye of the god of the ocean, Poseidon. A satyr attempted to rape her, but the god intervened. Rather than continuing the assault himself, he chose to court her and promised her many springs, one of which was a hidden spring. Lerna is also housed one of the entryways into Hades. Amymone accepted Poseidon's promises and is said to live in Lerna to this day. Also, Amymone may be one of the Danus 50 daughters, collectively known as the Danads. It's, like I say, wherever you read the story, it kind of changes. Anne was one of the many dwarfs as well, just Anne, one that's in the Voluspa, and there's many dwarfs in that, obviously. Anna. From the folklore of Romanian gypsies, Anna was the queen of the Fae. Tall and lithe, Anna was staggeringly beautiful, generous, and kind. She lived in a magnificent mountain-top castle. According to legend, Anna lived and charmed life in her enchanted castle located in Transylvanian mountains. Her life was idyllic until she captured the eye of the king of demons. Anna refused his advances and proposals of marriage until his demonic horde attacked her castle and began to heat her fairy entourage in order to save her remaining people. She agreed to marry him. Anna, being a goddess of fertility, conceived a child with her very first sexual encounter with the king of demons, forever thereafter condemning her offspring to be born as demonic beings. After a lengthy and horrific pregnancy, she gave birth to the demon of disease. After 10 such ordeals, she was able to convince the king of demons to set her free on the promise whenever one of her fae reached the age of 999 years of age, it would marry one of his Lokalika, a type of malevolent spirit. Filled with remorse and shame, Fairy Queen Anna almost left her castle in Carpathian Mountains. However, when she does, she travels in the form of a golden toad. If she is approached with great veneration, she will fulfill any wish you ask of her. In the Celtic language, Anna translates to mean abundant, while in Romanian it means nourishment or sustenance, though they both sort of have the same kind of meaning. Anatta Shisha, also just Anatta, meaning endless. The king of the Naga and the cosmic serpent in Hindu mythology, Anatta Shisha was described as being immense and having either 7 or 1,000 heads. He was a protector and supporter of the god Vishnu. Ananta Shisha's bit was not only poisonous, but it could also spit fire. This was the same fire it would use to destroy the earth at the end of the earth cycle. Anar, sword part. It's one of the many dwarfs in the writings of the Voluspa. And now we're on Anchiro. Anchiro was a nymph from the mythology of classical Greek and Rome, one of the naiads, born the daughter of the river god Eresinos. She was one of the many nurses to the infant god Zeus. He had a lot of nurses though, didn't he? Andvari. Andvari was a dwarf from Norse mythology. He once spied a great hoard of gold belonging to a school of river nymphs. As he stole their gold, the nymphs begged him to return it, promising an array of sensuous delights if he did. Andvari knew he was so deformed, hideous and ugly. The only way he would ever have love and affection of the women would be by it. In his realization and rage, he swore an oath to the gods, claiming from that moment on he would love nothing but gold. Using his innate magical abilities, he turned his stolen treasure into a magical golden ring he named the Andvaranoth, Andvari's gift. It had the ability to both locate and generate gold. By use of the ring, Andvari had an amazing hoard of magical armor, weapons, and items of incredible value. In one fell swoop, the entire collection was stolen by the god Loki when he needed to pay a ransom. Initially, the dwarf was not devastated by his loss, as he intended to remake his beloved hoard, but Loki forced him to surrender the ring, and Varanoth as well. Andvari knew he had no choice to comply with the god's demands. Before doing so, he used innate magic abilities to place a curse upon the ring, dooming anyone who possessed it. It's one of my favourite stories, that actually, to be fair. So yeah, I'm kind of glad that story was in here. Anyway, guys, that's the next part of the world of fairies. They're so very interesting, aren't they? To when you look way back and then you learn about all the different ones through time. There's so many different ones. Although they sound more or less the same, it makes you wonder if it wasn't just wherever they were from, the name changed, you know. Could it have been culture? Could it have been time that changed the names and they did have the same names? Kind of amazes me. Please hit that like, guys. Share if you can. And if you've not yet subscribed, please consider doing so. Also, I'd love it if you would drop me a comment down below because any of that is completely free and it really helps the channel. Many blessings.
Wysteria, energy, twister.